Harry and I are here this morning. Harry called this past week, and I suggested that we have this conversation available to everyone to listen to. Harry and I have talked since it's 2022, I think.
2022, yeah.
Yeah, first time. So
yeah, June 2022.
Yeah. So you remember the dates well?
Yes. I've been going through some pictures. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me what's going through your head. What are you thinking?
Yeah. Sometimes it comes and goes. But about a week ago, sometimes it just feels so good, just great, like right now, that that I can actually overcome my overthinking, and I start thinking. I wanna. Sometimes I think like what, like right now I feel so great. I wanna I wanna know how it feels to be like I used to be before. It's like
You mean
I
you
want
mean great or paralyzed and panicked?
paralyzed
Yeah.
and panic, but
Yeah.
with this mentality, with this like like with this type of knowledge right now.
Right.
I want to see how it feels, but every time I do that, it's like I I actually go back. It's not the same. It's not as severe as before,
Yeah.
but it's hard. So I need to stop. I actually learned not to do that anymore. Uh, just 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 leave it in the past.
Well, keep in mind that everything's always only in the present,
Mm.
right? So if everything that's happening is happening right now and you think some of what's happening shouldn't be happening, that's exactly the place I found you in that day when you were standing outside the hospital door. Remember?
Yeah.
And what did we conclude that day?
The, I'm sorry, what was that again? I didn't get the last one.
What did I suggest you do while you were standing there?
The, when I was just very tense and anxious, just to let it go.
Yeah. Well, and I think it was more let it be.
Yes, let it be.
Yeah.
Yes, let it be.
Yeah.
Yes.
So my experience, and also experience with, I don't know how many people, but dozens, if not hundreds. If I think I don't have something and I don't think it should be what it is while it is right now, I don't think I have anything to let go of. So I start struggling again.
Hmm.
So the possibility, the interesting thing about the freedom we have is that the possibility to go wrong is always possible. Always. It isn't like we fix this like a car and then the car will run forever because it got a tune up. Still going to need another tune up and probably filters changed and oil and all these other things, right? Because
Hmm.
we're in this process, this experience that we're having in our body. And if everything that's possible is possible, whatever that possibility is, I don't know what it all is in detail, but if I know that it's possible now, one of those possibilities is that I think things that aren't right are right, or think things that are wrong are right, which would be the same thing, or think things that are false are true. As soon as I do that, I start that inner conflict that doesn't seem to be visible, but becomes very apparent quickly because I can feel the threat, that peril that you felt, that panic, that oh no, doesn't have to be as severe to remember that's not a place I want to go back to as bad as it was, right? So that panic alone starts the panic all over, or can. So part of what my experience has taught me is to know that it's always possible to go wrong and it's always possible to think that it's right. And when I'm experiencing those things like you described, whether I think I'm doing those things or not, I'm doing those things. I'm entertaining some thought in my system that I may not think I'm entertaining because it's not part of the conversation I'm having about what's happening. It doesn't seem to be in my head. It just seems to fill my body. The effect becomes something my body notices or that I notice in my body, right? Does that line up for you?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So you and I, we've had a little bit of a relationship now, and talking
Mm,
about it, like you calling me, reaching out, actually taking that step, confirms your interest in dealing with this rather than sitting alone thinking about it more and how to stop it and fight it. Confirms your interest in thinking you can overcome it while you're the one creating it. So if you showed up at a wrestling match and you were there to fight yourself, you couldn't win and you couldn't lose. Because
I know.
there's no, it's the same, it's just kind of crazy. And we do that internally. We become, like in a story, the thesis, the basis of the story, and then we become the antithesis, which the antagonist. So we're the protagonist and the antagonist simultaneously, the master and the slave in our own thinking. So if something's happening, and I can assure you that everything's always happening wherever we are. Everything, everywhere is happening. We're a part of it all. And that may seem grand, but in fact, if this relative experience is relative, everything is interconnected. And that's what's
Mhm.
absolute about it. Everything is interconnected. Everything's changing. The one thing that doesn't change is that everything's changing. So if I start noticing that, it's kind of like the tides. If I think that the tide is down and I like the beach better while the tide is down, and I think it should only be down, I'm going to have a problem because it's going to come up. It's going to return. The high tide's going to come back, and then it's going to go down, and then it's going to come up. And it's like I breathe in and out.
Mhm.
So beginning to
Yeah.
talk about it offers a little perspective because you're not alone doing this. I would say humans have been doing this since the beginning of written history. For us to have such a history filled of oppression and suppression and killing people in the name of what people think was right because someone else didn't think that and they thought that self-righteousness and self-indignation justified killing that person because they have another way of thinking. Think how afraid we have to be of thinking that we must think it's reality, when in fact it's just something we do. It's something we are designed to do to help us survive and thrive.
Yes. Yeah, at some point I was like that. I was afraid of my thinking
Yeah.
because just
Well, I would say to you that it's probably justified because what I learned was that when I was afraid of my thinking, I was thinking something that was scary.
yes.
And the basis of that fear is that the thought's real. If I think I'm the creator of reality, I don't think there's any other creator. And now I have to fight everyone to convince them of my way of thinking, but not even only everyone, but everything on top of it. All of life's terms, all of the principles of how things operate out there, I think should only work the way I think they should work. So I'm constantly insisting on everything to go the way I think it should, rather than notice that the friction I'm creating by doing that is actually giving me evidence that I'm wrong. And I'm
Mm,
afraid because I think I'm right. The wrong isn't the problem, it's the thinking I'm right. It's once I make that decision, and that's really the addictive cycle. It's the only I start to think I don't have anything to do with it. Then I think there's nothing I can do about it. And then I think it's the only thing I can do. And now I feel paralyzed because I can't get out of it. I've created this sort of trinity of thoughts that gives me the impression there's nowhere to go.
I know that sounds familiar.
Yeah. So you're always where you are. And you always have the choice to think whatever you want. Now, it doesn't mean we have the choice to think because our bodies sort of think. That's just part of the body. But how and what we think is the choice. So if I choose to think I like something, and then I choose to think that's reality, I choose to feel threatened by everything else that isn't that thing I like. And anyone else who doesn't like that thing all of a sudden becomes a potential enemy, a threat, lingering, potentially ready to pounce. When I'm really feeling the interior landscape of an experience I'm experiencing based on the thinking I'm doing about that thing. So I can like whatever I want. And what I learned is that I like liking things and I like not liking things. So it kind of takes the pressure off to realize, oh, I'm making choices. They're preferences. I'm certainly welcome to make those.
That's what I did the other day too. You said the right words. I actually learned that I don't like things. I don't like to think about things because the other day I was like, wait, I don't. It's hard. It's hard for me to give up, to surrender.
me,
That's my ego.
me too.
That, that's my ego. It's like I can. I know no, you're not gonna beat me. I can overthink and beat you, but I learned to not like things. I was the other day I said I don't like this. I don't like this type of thinking. And you just and
Was it in relationship to somebody else?
no, because of my overthinking from 2 years ago.
I see.
I just didn't like the way because even last night, sometimes songs or music would just remind me of the past, and I said it to myself, what if you go through this, you're going back. I don't like this feeling, and I mean, I listened to the song, but I just didn't like the feelings that I used to have
Yeah.
before. So I just
My sense is that we don't struggle with love. If love is the nature of the freedom we have to pick what we want, to choose what we think, how we think, and what we think, it isn't love that we're contesting, it's like and dislike. And when we think those are real, rather than just choices, we can get stuck in that treadmill very quickly. And that treadmill is an addiction. It's an addiction that things can only be the way I think they are, and then should only be that way. And I feel like they're then happening to me right away because I feel like I'm in the thinking. I've decided to be in the thinking because now it's reality. And where else would I be but in reality if I think that my thinking is real? So I lose my perspective. And if I'm sitting alone thinking about it, I'm going to feel darker and I'm going to feel heavier and I'm going to feel depressed and I'm going to feel afraid. But the good news is that the fear, when you start noticing it, is actually an accurate sensation for what you're doing. Rather than see it as something to run from, you'll see it sort of like a flashing light on your dashboard that may be inconvenient if you're trying to get somewhere. But if you don't pay attention to the flashing light, you're probably not going to get where you're going anyhow. If you're out of oil or out of gas or something, it's telling you need to pay attention to this. And the attention isn't to fight it, like you're talking about the surrender. The problem with surrendering is that we've been in that loop so long, thinking the fight's going to win, that you and I both have fights going on in our system that we don't even think we're fighting right now. And that's where that real thing, you're starting, as far as I can tell, to notice that things are going on in your experience that you haven't been paying attention to at all. And by having a little bit of peace, a little bit of freedom compared to the extreme lack of peace and lack of freedom, you've started noticing those things. And by noticing those things, you thought before, because you got over one thing 2 years ago, that shouldn't be happening anymore. It's the same thinking back then that got you to the place today, based on an experience that you haven't really processed yet, honestly, and said, wow, the bad feeling is actually a bad thought. It's something I've been thinking for a long time. Now, I'm going to suggest to you, and you don't have to answer this or think about it in terms right now, but there are probably things that you experienced when you were very, very young that were very hard for you, and you didn't know what to do with them. Sort of similar to your more grown years when there were some things you were experiencing that were very, very hard, and you didn't know what to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those decisions became what you thought was your reality. They became your sort of the decision, the conclusion you came to seemed to give you an anchor because it seemed to work just enough, but probably didn't work in all respects. And you've been living with those things. Now, it isn't because they're in the past, but they're in the present. They're still built into your bodily system of stress and anxiety. Your body has been absorbing energy and placing it where there's tension in your body, storing it, sort of like, you know what static electricity is? When you rub your feet on the carpet and touch something and it
Hmm.
kind of pops. So think of that happening over years and years and years, and you're afraid of that pop. You're afraid of finally releasing all that because you know that there's something charged in your system.
Yeah,
So
I think. Yeah, I think that
beginning
might be it. Yeah.
beginning to notice it in the same way you noticed it that day and just say, oh, this is now dealing with another circumstance, another time, another place, all that kind of stuff. But the effect is the same. I feel like I don't want it. I feel like I have to get away from it. I feel like it's happening to me and I can't control it. All that stuff is coming from that base root of thought that thoughts are reality rather than imagination, rather than considering things, rather than contemplating things. If I think all you are is what I think, then my thinking ends up making believe that you are nothing more than that. So what do I end up with? A relationship to you that has almost nothing to do with you as a whole essential being and person. And that's true with anything
Hmm.
I look at and decide I like it, I don't like it. I can like and not like things and learn that I can like what I don't like and not like what I like too. Because if I like something too much, it seems to get to a point where I don't like it anymore. It becomes too excessive.
Hmm.
But addiction tells me I can't get enough, so I have to keep trying for more. And mentally, it just keeps me on that bend. So I've been on that bend as far back as I can remember to some degree. And the difference in talking about it is start noticing that pretty much all the effects are the same for everybody. They're not very different. They just come at different times with different circumstances and different faces and places and things. But the essence of it is the same. It tends to be a sense of trapped, alone, disconnected, worthless, impossibility, can't do anything about it. And that starts to raise some fear. But the fear isn't because that's true and real, it's because the thinking is thought to be true and real. You don't even need to know what the thought is to simply admit that you're thinking something you don't even think you're thinking that's causing it, and start looking at the effects as mirror images of the source, which is in the thinking. So if I think my thinking is the source of reality, I think that source is God, which is where ego comes in. I start thinking everything is only what I think it is. And if it doesn't go the way I think it should, my life is threatened. And the fact is, I'm threatening my life by thinking that way in terms of my body, because the stress and anxiety and pressure is causing, it's undermining all of my bodily systems that are designed to balance, to maintain balance and heal. That's the whole point of the body's systems: nervous system, psychosomatic system, psychoparasympathetic system, all the different metabolic system, cardiac system, all those different systems that operate without us thinking about them too much, right? The heart beats, the blood flows, the oxygen goes where it needs to, we eat the vitamins. We worry more about how things taste and what we like than we do the nutrition the body's getting very often. What's the byproduct of this? Am I getting the vitamins I need, the minerals I need, the fiber I need?
Hmm.
My experience is there's no greater trauma than making believe that we don't exist. And the idea within addiction is to make believe that what's happening shouldn't be happening. And as a result, I'm not where I belong, and I'm alone in the universe. And not only that, I don't even exist in the universe because I have no responsibility for anything going on. That's the presumption. So being alone means you could be part of something, but not existing means you have no basis whatsoever in existence. And that's a horrifying thought. So it is probably, in my experience, the source of trauma, present traumatic stress, not post, not pre, present, happening now, caused now, imperiling our experience now because we're not talking about it honestly and openly and learning to actually interact on a basis that's honest and that's beginning to notice that we're all basically doing the same thing. When we're right, we know what to do. When we're wrong, we don't always seem to know what to do. We seem to struggle with the rightness of wrong in our experience. And the fact that this is an addiction is probably news, but it's not new news. That thought has been floated for almost 100 years.
Mhm.
How many other people do you talk to during the day?
My brothers, and every once in a while, my parents, and my daughter and my girlfriend.
And can you talk about some of these things with them in terms of your process?
With my parents, yes, and my brothers.
And do they
And
relate to it?
my one of my brothers, yes, yeah,
And
they
what
can relate.
happens
Like,
when you do that?
oh, it's like, yeah. Once I start talking to people, it's like I feel lighter. It's
Yeah,
just talking to like last night too. I was a little stressed out. I spoke with my parents, and it feels great to be honest. Just saying things, and then I actually I actually spoke with my dad last night about things that I experienced, and he actually experienced the same thing too as well. So he's opening up as well too, because I always think that I'm the only one experiencing these things.
exactly. Well, so do they, by the way,
Yes,
which is why
mhm,
they don't talk about it, which is
yes,
exactly what an addiction is, thinking I'm not the thing I'm doing. But like to an alcoholic and a drug addict, they think they become drug addicts and alcoholic because they're in the thinking
mhm,
rather than just see that they are using alcohol and drugs to justify. That's the solution in their brain. Solution is I'm going to use drugs so that I don't feel that what's happening is happening. So I can feel better about what's happening. But the problem doesn't get resolved at all. It gets worse because it continues to grow. It's like a doctor
mhm,
giving you aspirin for cancer.
mhm.
What's going to happen? Come back in a year. Take these aspirin every day and come back. And the chances are whatever's wrong is going to continue to grow.
Yes,
Within the biological system, everything seems to want to survive, including bacteria and fungi and diseases. They all want to survive and thrive. That natural drive to survive is built into everything. Doesn't mean it's healthy and it doesn't mean it's right. But if we're thinking toxic thoughts and not conceding that it's our own thinking that's doing it, we're searching endlessly for an excuse and a reason and thinking that to talk about it has no connection because it's so insane to be doing it that we think we have no place and no connection with anybody and that nobody would ever understand it, when in fact, if this has been a human problem and we've never talked about it, the chances are to some degree everybody's doing it. Doesn't mean
mhm,
that they're doing it to a degree that makes them incapable of living and expressing love for people and doing things that are nice, but there's some defensive structure going on inside there trying to look better than they often feel. And that is not uncommon in my experience at all. When people actually admit how they're feeling, most people I deal with admit that they've had suicidal thoughts.
mhm,
And the real suicidal thought comes from the idea that what's happening shouldn't be happening. And now all of a sudden I feel like I have no place. And that's a textbook idea of not existing. If I have no place, what am I going to feel? Worthless, disconnected. There's no use. There's nothing I can do. It's hopeless. I'm just going to kill myself. And the irony is, we're designed, the arc of life has us dying at some point anyhow. Going, that physical form is going to transform into something that it was before we got the body. It's part of the arc. That's the point of the whole story that we're living through or experience.
mhm, yes,
Talking about it Just being honest about your experience. It's not telling anybody else what to think or do, because nobody's going to listen to you if you do. But talking about your experience, even in little bits, that same feeling that you had, Harry, of relief and a little bit lighter, is because you're actually offering people some hope and a connection. You're talking about things honestly that are happening between you and other people. What's happening on this planet, socially and otherwise, is not happening as an accident. It's happening as the culmination of all the thinking that each of us are doing. And you take that on a collective basis, and if we're unhealthy in our own experience and we're thinking things that aren't true are true, what's going to happen on the social level? Social ills, war, all that kind of stuff are natural byproducts of this line of thinking. Certainly, it is not our highest and best use.
Yeah.
So you may not have language for that, which is why I suggest sometimes when we're having the group conversation, that listening back through it after you've been in it, you'll hear things that you didn't hear when you were in it. Because while you're there, there's a different experience, because now you could potentially be called on, you could speak up, you could sometimes have an impulse to speak and then not. You may speak and then I talk too much.
No, you give us great knowledge. That's why I like to listen.
Point is that when you're listening, you have a chance to begin to notice some things that you may not normally notice, and actually begin to just say, wow, rather than thinking of it as something to do something about, because thinking is already a doing, thinking is an action. And I'm not sure that this is thought of that way typically. Thinking is this invisible thing that feelings seem to be obvious effects. What we say seems to be an obvious effect. What we do seems to be an obvious effect. But the fact that it's being caused by a thought, every voluntary action we take, including how we feel and how we think, in terms of relation to that thinking, is coming from that thinking. So if my thinking is wrong because I think it's right when it's wrong, I'm going to be conflicted in my mental state. I'm going to feel some stress. And the beauty of that, again, is to see that our body is actually accurately assessing what's happening in our thinking, not in reality. We've mistaken the whole universe and world and people for what we're doing, because we're seeing it from a point of view we think we have nothing to do with it, and end up projecting it onto everything outside. We're actually looking at the world through a lens of that conflict and that toxic thought. To begin to notice it's your thinking, you begin seeing, you said it the other day, that that afternoon that I spoke to you, and it seemed to me it was later afternoon when we finally spoke that day back in 2022, that the colors started to become clearer to you. Your eyes actually saw things in a brighter sense of color.
Yeah, that was just the experience. It's just it's like the pop that you talk about.
Yeah.
I was afraid. I was afraid to, I guess, to pop. I would always run away from that feeling.
Yeah.
I didn't want that.
Well, the running away is the idea that there's something there to actually run away from. And to begin to realize that if we're thinking something that's wrong, it doesn't have any basis in anything other than our thinking. It isn't real because it isn't out there in the world. There's no place for it in the world. So if I think I am my thoughts, I again think I have no place in the world. But I'm thinking I'm in my thought now, rather than simply having a thought. If I think I am my body, I think my life is threatened by physical conditions. My bodily experience is definitely threatened by all sorts of things every day, but it's also designed to weather most of those storms. Thinking those shifts shouldn't happen is like thinking because it rained, it will never rain again once it stops. It's kind of fluid. It's like we're on an ocean. We're moving, much different than the experience we have with gravity, which, by the way, is completely invisible, and yet we rely on it all the time. It grounds us all the time, but we talk about wanting to be grounded. Think of how much credit we have to give thinking to make believe we're not grounded when gravity is always grounding us, and we don't see it at all, and we don't even understand it yet. In the best scientific minds, we really don't understand gravity yet. We have lots of ideas, we don't understand it. But the fact is, we don't need to understand it for it to be doing what it's doing. So I can take myself off the hook of thinking I have to understand it before I can appreciate it, but simply say that it's happening, I'm confident in, rather than what's happening and why is it happening and how is it happening and what should be happening. All those other questions just lead to doubt. If I can stabilize by simply admitting that it's happening, gravity is holding me to the planet, air seems to be available whenever I breathe. Both things that we don't see, but we know they're there to utilize them. They're good examples of the stability that we have and that we ignore by thinking is our sole source, and then thinking the instability of thinking means we're not grounded. While we're grounded, we think we're not present because we're thinking about other things. It's not true. We're present thinking about other things. And where we're consumed with those thoughts, we think we're not present because we really think we're our thoughts. We really think the sum total of all we are is what we think. It's not true.
Yeah, once I realize that my thinking is wrong, and then when I when I surrender, it's just everything vanishes. It's like there's no more fighting.
So let me, to that point, and that's very well said. You're the one that was creating the illusion that something was there, and thinking that that illusion was real, you thought there was something to get over. And once you realized it was just a thought, it doesn't vanish. You start to see there was nothing ever there.
Mm.
That's the basis of the insanity. We really believe it's there because we've created a picture of it in our brain, like a movie. And all of a sudden, everything we're relating to is based on that picture and all the other pictures. Like people talk about having voices in their heads.
Yeah, that used to happen to me because I was always fighting myself by thinking.
Yeah.
It was just that happens to me when I'm stressed out, and then I'm running away from my thinking from something. But once
So,
I face it and I understand what's going on, it's like, where are they? Like, there's yes, there's
yeah. And
no,
then yet
no,
new circumstance has them come back a little bit. What my experience is when I
yeah,
get overwhelmed by things, because I have expectations that are connected to thoughts that I think are right and real. Whenever I'm overwhelmed, and I'm going to get overwhelmed every time because those limited thoughts I have are just limited. So there's always going to be circumstance beyond those thoughts. And when I'm aware of that, it seems to threaten me. But now, rather than be gripped with that and think I need to get over it, I just notice I'm starting this whole thing. I'm the one causing this in my thinking. I'm choosing somehow to be thinking something that I don't even think I'm thinking, but it's creating the impact so I can now see it
hmm
and concede it. So the surrender is really more of a concession than thinking there was any fight in it at all. The fight was my insistence that I keep thinking about the thing. I keep restarting the thought that there's something there.
yeah. Because I'm the one creating everything. I'm the one. Because sometimes I'm like, sometimes it just feels so great. I'm bored, and it's like there's a thought that pops up. That pops up.
What?
It's just sometimes I just feel great,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden I'm stressed out about something, and and I get so frustrated and upset that it's like, you know what, I can overcome this overthinking. I can overcome my past and everything. It's like I don't care about anything. It's just, but that creates a problem. That creates another cycle in my overthinking, and and it just creates an issue again. But
The
I'm actually, once I become aware of it, I know.
the better you feel, the more aware of it you will get.
Hmm
So this is almost, in one respect, justification not to feel better. and stop feeling better. But in
Yeah, yeah,
fact,
yeah. Let me share something with you.
yeah,
This happened. I actually became aware of it back in 2021. Uh, I was kind of like noticing things. Uh, one day I was like, what if I don't feel stressed out all of a sudden? And I became so peaceful. But I was so peaceful and relaxed that my mind, I was that it wasn't normal for me. I was so used to being stressed out and anxious that I actually went back to being anxious.
yeah,
I just didn't like that peaceful feeling. I was so addicted to that overthinking. I was so addicted to being stressed out. I was so
yeah.
addicted to being anxious. That feeling peaceful and relaxed, that wasn't me.
So recovery, Harry, is beginning to notice that if it's happening in the present and we're experiencing those things, we're causing those things. Doesn't mean they're real. It means that we're causing effects. We're literally just manifest. Our thinking causes effects, and we feel those effects. Guilt, when we feel guilty, is that we're guilty for those causes. What do people normally think in guilt? I want to get away from guilt. I don't want to feel guilty anymore. Well, we're actually feeling the accurate assessment of the thoughts we're doing. And it generally comes with shame. We're ashamed of continuing to do that same thing, thinking it will work when it can't work. And we know it won't work. Because if we didn't know it, we wouldn't be bothered by it. We wouldn't be disturbed by it. We wouldn't be upset over it. We wouldn't be trying to stop it if we didn't know better. We would just know that's all there is. And that's the way, just like our body functions. Most of it we don't think about at all. We know that it does what it does as it does what it does. And pretty much if it doesn't hurt, we're not thinking about it. Unless we're asking it to, run a 3-minute mile. So
Yeah,
a couple of things I want to mention to you. It's not your thinking. When you think it's thinking, it's your choice of how and what. So
yeah,
your thinking,
I
it's kind of
actually,
like putting water in a gas engine. It's never going to work. So the mechanics of the brain don't work well when we feed it information that isn't true and then demand that it try to figure out how to turn it into truth. Creates a complete problem with the thinking. It can't process it any more than alcoholics can process alcohol and drug addicts can process drugs, all those things. It's the exact same thing within the skull that is creating the compulsions.
yeah, I actually found out too that I get thoughts, but it's just anybody can get thoughts. But the problem with me was that I'm creating a story based on this.
Yeah.
I'm the one. The story is the what hurts me, but I'm the one creating the story. I'm the
Yeah.
one feeling filling in the blanks. I'm the one doing it. That's I actually became aware of that. That I'm the
So
one
that's evidence
doing
that
it.
we're creating a narrative. We're creating pictures in our brain. And
Mhm.
because they seem like things in the world, we think they're real when they're just imagination. Now, that isn't to say you can't have a story. But again, when you think it's real, you really believe that now you're in the story. And there's no writer that ever wrote a great book. Hemingway, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, any of the writers never thought because they finished the book, they died. Or an actor thought because the movie's over, he's dead. Those were characters they created for storytelling to help us see our experience a little bit better, to give us perspective. We're each doing that with each other in some way, if we're listening and we're willing to notice. I once read about a guy who had read voraciously his whole life, all kinds of books, hundreds of books. And he said, I stopped reading when I started listening to people. He said, there's plenty of them out there. I'm surrounded by them all the time, and I haven't been listening to them at all. If I'm not listening to my own experience and not accurate about that experience, I've devalued my potential to notice the value of others.
Yeah, that was very interesting for me to become aware of the stories that I used to create in my mind.
Well, consider all those things you're afraid of facing are stories. You could just label them as stories without having to. I just think of them as thoughts that are right, thought to be thoughts that are wrong, right, thought to be right, or thoughts that are right, thought to be wrong. That I've created a conflict because I think they're real. So when you're storytelling and you think it's real, that's fantasy being thought of as reality. That's largely been thought of as insanity through history. And that's exactly what it is, in my estimation. But this is an induced form of sanity, an imposed form of sanity based on the thinker thinking their thinking is real, not based on what you do or what I do together, but based on what I do or you do alone. The choices I make, the decisions I come to, and the things I think define me then, again, I'm thinking all I am is words that I've attached to things. Not true. There's an essence that goes well beyond anything because it isn't limited. There's an absolute state of being. So if I think those thoughts, ego by definition in Latin is I. We've talked about this before, I know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an interesting thing. We talk about I need more self confidence. I need more self awareness. I need more self. Who is the I in the sentence? Why am I not just saying, I want more confidence? I want more esteem. I want speaking for the actual I. So ego, by definition, is that I. And what do we use it as? A false self. The ego we talk about is not the I, it's a false self. It's a self that's an image. And the image is created about the thoughts we have about our thoughts. So when I think I'm thinking to myself, I'm really thinking to my thoughts. And when I start noticing that, because it's not, if I align with what's actually happening, I have complete freedom to continue or stop. If I persist on insisting it be what I think it should, I'm trying to imagine it isn't what it is, and I'm creating a cycle and a loop that's just going to go on forever because I'm the instigator of it and the one constantly trying to stop it rather than saying I'm the one starting it. The problem isn't in the stopping, it's in the starting. So beginning to live with that and sit with that as those thoughts come up, you'll notice that your present moment offers you the chance to either see them clearly or unclearly. And the point you were talking about feeling good is kind of like you've been wearing glasses that have been scratched for years and think that everything in the world is scratchy or red or whatever the color of the glasses are. And you get them cleaned. And all of a sudden, everything, like I have a friend getting cataract surgery, and he's been seeing foggy for years. And I know when I'm done, he's going to see he's going to see things he hasn't seen for years. Doesn't mean those things weren't there. It means his ability to see them was impaired. I impair my ability to see things by making believe how I think they are, or what I think they are is how they are, and then turning them into what I think is reality as a result of the confidence I have in my thinking as being reality. It's never going to be true. It's never going to work. It's always going to create a byproduct that is disturbing and destructive and definitive, noticeable, always. So to think I shouldn't be having the effect while I'm having the same cause is a major problem. And what I've learned with most people is they're trying to treat the effect as the cause. They're trying to stop the problem. They're trying to feel better about the thing that's worse, and they're ignoring the fact that they are maintaining the thing that's worse, which is what causes them constantly to think feeling better is the solution. They know naturally that something's wrong, but they're not admitting it. They're not talking about it. They're not conceding it. They're not being honest about it. And as a result, they're creating a maligned disconnect. So the fight seems to be a fight, but when you begin to realize there is no fight because there is no insanity that isn't other than the thought we had, like you just said. As soon as it vanishes, you begin to realize, oh, it was just a thought to begin with. There was nothing there but the thought. Same with ego. There's no self that's separate from us in our essence. There's just what we think about ourself. And really, what we're thinking about is thinking itself. This contemplative advantage we have to think about thinking has been turned into a self we think we are. It's never going to be true. But we can think it is. We're free to think it is. Love has given us the absolute right to think whatever we want, in whatever way we want, in whatever way we can.
Mm-hmm.
So the other sad point to that is that we want what's happening because it's an accurate assessment. And what we really don't want is to continue pretending that it isn't. And to see it clearly is to start to see again that I've been the one insisting on it to persist and persist and persist by my resistance to having things as they are. And to begin to see that everything's already as it is resolves a lot of issues because I don't have to think of them individually one at a time and try to get to the bottom of each time I ever said anything or did anything with each person I ever did it with and straighten it all out. I can begin to see that the only thing I'm hanging on to are ideas about it that have no basis other than my thinking they have basis. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
That's the pop. That's the pinprick in the balloon that the bat can't pop. I can't self-abuse myself into a better use of myself because that self is already imagined to be real, imagined to be reality, when it's just an illusion being thought of as reality. It's imagination in the brain. Something to consider. The mind, the capital mind, is not our brain. Our brain thinks, the mind knows. So if the essence of essence is that all-knowing, all-present, all-conscientious, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, always, always, always all that is, then that's all it's ever been. And that's all we've ever been. And we've been sourced in that the whole time, while humans have been fighting over the definition of that the whole time too. We've been fighting over the right or wrong God, as though there's a division in that God, as though God is a human and God demands of humans do God's work to destroy and corrupt each other. Not true. Can't be true. If truth is true, that's an essence that is not debatable. Just is what it is, as it is now. And if we share that and talk about that surrender you think you need to do, you'll notice a month later you're not even doing the thing you used to think you had to do all the time and had to stop all the time, because the thinking you have to stop it is the thinking that you think it's there, that you're restarting it all the time. You think it's there and real because you keep restarting it, believing in this thing being there. There's no belief in reality. Doesn't need it. There's no trust or faith or hope. Doesn't need it. But when you trust something real and you have faith in something real and you have hope in something real, all it takes is an instant of that hope to confirm that reality is reality, just as you described. The illusion vanishes, and what do you feel? Pretty good. It's pretty amazing. Because there's a sense of place, a sense of belonging, a sense of knowing, all of it. And all we've been doing is having that the whole time. That's our nature. That's what's been given us by love, whatever that loving source is. And we've been acting like we don't have it. It's all it is, and it's an act based on a thought that's an action that's untrue, thought to be true, or true, thought to be false. Thoughts aren't reality, they're just imagined. Imagine that.
Yeah, that's a great feeling, feeling like this. Just peaceful. Every once in a while it comes and goes. But
Well, it never
I'm
comes or
learning to deal
goes.
with it.
It never
Maybe I'm the
comes and
one.
goes. Your thinking about it comes
Yes,
and goes. That's the thing that
yes,
comes and goes.
yes. That's what last night I made a decision because I was a little stressed out. I wanted to remember about the past, but I said I don't think so. I'm the one who's studying it. I'm the one who's studying everything. But I was like, if you go this way, you know what's gonna happen. So I made the decision not to go that way. You know, it just you're absolutely right. Yeah, I'm the one who I'm the one who makes the choice. I'm the one who decides all this. But I
Years
was
ago, sorry,
mhm.
go ahead.
But I was just sometimes it just I was so addicted to it that I just I want to be like it's like my every time I'm stressed out or feeling sad, it's just like being it's like a autopilot. It's just like my mind goes, okay, let's go this way. Okay, let's go. But it's like training my mind.
Yeah.
Don't do this. Don't do
It's
that.
like robotic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm,
Because it's only going to do one thing, go crazy.
yes.
Literally. It's just going to cycle and cycle and cycle and cycle and cycle. It's trying to turn something false into reality, trying to turn
Mhm,
fantasy into reality. It can never happen. That's why we have to think
mhm,
about it all the time, because it can't ever happen. But the delusion is the next moment it might, if I just continue, I might finally win a hand at blackjack. I've lost all my money and I'm down to the last bit. I might finally win a hand, so I'm going to put it all in. It's a gamble.
mhm.
And I
Yes.
guarantee you, it's an absolute losing gamble. And it's 100% guaranteed. So it's interesting that gamblers would love to have a guaranteed bet. And yet, in this case, we don't seem to take the guarantee and say, oh, I know exactly where this is going. 100%. I can bet on it and get a full return on my investment. And what do we bet on? The losing proposition that if we continue, it will fix it. Why? Because we're not thinking in the present. We're thinking about the future. We're thinking about the past. We're trying to overcome the past and build it into the future rather than simply notice that where we are is where we are. Now, I'll make another suggestion to you, just a little practice. When you decide not to do what you're doing, you're once again engaging in a fight about what you're doing rather than noticing that if you've been doing it for as long as you've been doing it, you might just want to live with it for a while and start to notice, just like we talked about outside the hospital door, when you said, I feel like I'm going to go insane. And I said something to the effect of, why don't you just be crazy for a minute? Just embrace it, have it. If you're
Mhm,
there, the process, the only thing that makes decisions are brains. And the addictive nature is thinking we need to constantly come to the right decision because we've been constantly making the wrong decisions. So we're operating from desperation all the time, trying to make the right next decision and figure it out and figure it out and figure it out. And we're not figuring it out. We're figuring it back into the cycle, this sort of consumed cycle of thought. You follow that?
mhm.
So if the analytical process is being used to condemn us, and we have a knowing nature that doesn't make decisions because it doesn't think, like I described the mind as a knowing mind, not a thinking mind, it doesn't have anything to think about because it knows everything. If that's the basis, if you sit and watch those things happening and just observe the discomfort, you will have it. And when you have it, you'll see that it has nothing at all to do. It doesn't have anything on its, there's no merit in it on its own. It isn't there, but the thinking you have that thinks it shouldn't be there. To think it shouldn't be there is to think there's something there. If it's all an illusion, you're thinking the illusion is real to have something to fight and stop. So you're restarting it by treating the effect again. So the suggestion is 2 or 3 deep breaths, close your eyes, just take it in, feel the feeling. The feeling is giving you an enormous amount of information that we end up not reading properly and taking advantage of. So we constantly think we need to look for it and find it and find the reason for it. Well, the reason is, in fact, the complication and the pain and the conflict and the contrasting opinions that are fighting in our own experience. That's all the information we need because it's all the information relative to the problem. So if you breathe and take it in and feel it, you'll start to notice that it will also dissipate, just like the illusion dissipates, the feelings dissipate, because you're not fighting them. You're not insisting on constantly trying to get the lid a little tighter on the pot of boiling water to keep the steam in.
You just said something really interesting too. Breathing. I also noticed too when I overthink. When I used to overthink, my breathing pattern was not the same.
It's very
Every
low,
time,
right?
every time I overthink something dark, it's like my breathing stops. It's like tense stops, and then all of a sudden I see that my brain is asking for oxygen. It's like you're not. I'm not taking right. But I started doing that. I started taking some deep breath,
Yeah.
and once I get some oxygen, I become very aware of everything. It just
Think
different.
of
It
the
just feels
fight
different.
with the thought is really a death wish. And what happens?
Mhm,
Our body begins to act like it. Our body begins to take less oxygen in. Posture gets bad because we start hunching over from the weight of it all. Our
mhm,
spine starts to act up. Our whole bodily system begins to underestimate its capacity because we are underestimating our thoughts and their impact. We're pretending that
mhm,
somehow I can refuse them rather than say, wait a minute, if I'm doing this and I don't even think I'm doing it, maybe sitting with it, listening, breathing, just sitting still for a minute and noticing it is a way of having it. If I have something holy, I know I can absolutely let it go because I know that I'm the one creating it holy. If I think any part of it is something I can't have, it's because it's some part of it is something I shouldn't have, don't want, hope would go away, all that kind of stuff. I want to feel better about it. So what am I doing? I'm reinforcing the wrong by thinking feeling better is going to save me. And that's exactly what an addiction is. Constantly trying to drink
mhm,
more and more and more to feel better, do more cocaine, do more fentanyl, do more meth. It's not going to happen. Gamble more. Well, the desperate gambler is always trying to overcome the losses they've made. The losses are almost guaranteed while the wins are not. They're occasional, but they're never enough. Or cities like Las Vegas and Macau and all those places around the world would not be growing at the rate they are. So we have all the evidence we need, and we listen to it backward when we're thinking from the point of view that we're in our thoughts. It all becomes backwards. What we understand is actually misunderstood. What we think is healthy is actually unhealthy. What we think is right is actually wrong. All of it is backwards. And it's embarrassing. We feel it. Self-consciousness is defined as undue regard for appearance. Why would we be so worried about how we appear if we weren't projecting an image that was false? When the thinking about that stops, the image stops, and you start letting things be what they are. And you start doing what you're doing as you're doing it. And also notice there's still little threads, little things that may come up that are easy to start to notice and say, oh, okay, I'm still doing that. Okay, I noticed that. I'm a little reactive to that person's thought. Must be a thought I'm defending. It becomes natural.
mhm,
Intuition is inspiration and wisdom. And intuition is knowledge beyond reason, meaning it's not in thinking. We normally think of intuition as experience and getting used to things, and then we sort of know how to make them work. That's not intuition. Intuition is knowing that everything already works. And the only thing I'm doing to cause it to seem like it's not working is misapplying my functional capacity by making believe what's wrong is right. I'm depreciating my capacity to actually function as a human.
mhm.
So desperation will always lead to more, inspiration will always lead to more. And you're talking about those moments where you see that clarity. That's inspiration because it's literally the spirit, what we call the spirit, whatever that is. Absolute freedom, absolute knowing, absolute presence, purity, truth, reality, real, not fake, not something we made up, something we're made of. Seems like a big deal, but it isn't.
I
It's
know.
natural. It's literally nature. We act like it's a miracle. And the miracle is that we could possibly have survived as long as a species, imagining that all things are as what we think of them. While we have plenty of instances historically of realizing major shifts in our own thinking by noticing that the world was not flat and that we weren't at the center of the universe, and on and on and on and on. There's been major shifts that all of a sudden everybody said, oh, 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 of course. I suspect we're in a time that this is another major shift consciously.
Yeah, it is just becoming more. I'm just becoming more aware of things. Just
Yeah. Well,
sometimes I think,
you're
yeah,
introducing it to your thinking. So you're becoming more, your thinking awareness is starting to say, oh, when I go down those paths, I expect to feel lousy. I don't have to go down that path anymore. You're starting to see the
mhm,
freedom you have to exercise. It's very flexible when you see it. It's like yoga of the mind, which is really what
yeah,
yoga is about, actually.
mhm, yeah. So
So,
it's great, it's great, but I just still, it's a process. That's
yeah.
how I see it. It's a process. Sometimes I just want it so bad. When I'm in this hole, I just, the thing is that when I'm anxious, sometimes I just don't want it. And by not wanting it, it's just I become more anxious. But you just said the right thing. It just let just let it, just feel it. Just don't just. I can't remember how you said it, but just be in the moment and feel it. Let that discomfort be with you and just
Having it
don't.
is embracing it.
Yeah.
It's really your body language speaking to you. And to the degree that we think we don't have it or shouldn't have it or think it should be something else, we're not listening. And to communicate fully, it's not just somebody talking, it's someone listening. Like in our experience, if nobody listened, there would be no point in doing this. And it doesn't mean that everybody's hearing everything clearly, but if they hear a little bit of what they know, they'll start operating on that knowing sense rather than the thinking sense. And the process you're talking about also, Harry, is that's the process of process is only in the brain and the physical realm. This other realm doesn't have a process because it doesn't change. And if that's the basis of existence, that is our stable source. That's the inspiration and the wisdom and the intuition naturally. So we all of a sudden know things that would never be expected to be known in the process of thinking, because it would take a process of elimination between trillions of other options to come to the right thing. But in that intuitive knowing, we already know it. We may not have the words for it because we haven't been good at actually introducing that experience, to listen to that experience and allow our bodies to start following it naturally, where we don't have to think much at all. We'll know exactly what to do within our thinking. So we can channel it, express it naturally, rather than constantly think it's up to us to decide. The constant decisions of the thing creating the problem that we think we have to escape. So decision making is the same. The obsessive thinking leads to obsessive decisions.
Mhm.
And not to say you can't do it or shouldn't do it, but if you're doing it, note it, just note it. I'm doing it and I'm living with it. And I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing, but I'm also going to notice that I'm doing that. And I can notice it and still go to work, and I can still drive, and I can still go get the groceries, and I can start to live with it. So I notice that this thing has been going on while I didn't think it was even happening. And now, by even noticing it, living with the discomfort, and living with the conflicts, and very often in my experience, I had a lot of tears. I had a lot of mourning, a lot of loss from the moments that I had preoccupied my attention with not the other person at all, people that I cared about and loved and couldn't even see them in terms of the narrow mindedness in my own thinking. And those things have an impact. Everything is impacting us all the time. So releasing that tends to come with emotions, and the emotions are expressions of that awareness. And they're also relieves, like laughter and tears. Tears can be joyous and awesome, and they can also be sad and pitiful. And laughter can laugh at somebody, or at our own experience and see how freeing it is to start noticing that we've been taking seriously a self that doesn't even exist and wondering why we were struggling and felt like an imposter and felt like we couldn't face it. But in fact, we'd been facing it all along. We just hadn't bothered to admit it in our thinking. So we're introducing our knowing nature to our thinking nature, which is the proper alignment that we're designed to channel that knowingness, begin to actually interact with the universe and its life's terms in a productive way, because the principles haven't changed while we've been changing our thinking. And if we begin to base our thinking on that principled nature of an absolute existence, it stabilizes the thinking very quickly, so we can start doing things we don't have to think much about at all and watch things work in ways we can't even imagine often.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing it. I mean, I know from today, your life is an example of having reclaimed, recycled what could have otherwise been thrown away, considered a waste, have no
Yeah.
use.
Yeah, but it's great, you know. Sometimes I just compare myself today
Yeah,
to 2 years ago. It is a process. Sometimes I just want it really bad, like want it done right away.
right.
Like when I feel anxious, I just want to feel like I feel right now, how I feel when I was a kid. But by doing that, I become more anxious. Just I just let it happen. You know, I
So
became aware. Go ahead, Jack.
consider some of the things now that you're dealing with, Harry, are very different than the things you're no longer dealing with that you became
Hmm.
aware of and they just went away. They don't happen anymore. So is in this process you're talking about, you're really processing through the history that's been built up in your body, the tension, the pressure, the anxiety, the stress, all the things you think are natural in life are actually unnatural byproducts. It's not to say we shouldn't be stressed and anxious. There's certain things that we're going to be stressed by.
Hmm.
You know, hurricanes, that hurricane that just happened, that's a good cause for stress. You don't know, am I going to make it through this? These are things that happen. We don't always know what's going to happen. We know that what's going to happen is going to happen, but we don't know the details enough to protect ourselves in every way. And yet that other knowing, I would suspect, has a greater sense of answers than certainly the analytical knowing that we try to gain in thinking. But to notice that you're not doing so many of those things and worrying about so many of those other things, and what you're really beginning to deal with are some of the things that people call subconscious, that have literally just been held down while you've been busy trying to avoid the things above them, the simpler things. So your actual growth is being witnessed in the new knowing that you've still got some work to do in relation to what's going on inside your own experience. You can't get there if you haven't been moving in that direction, if you haven't been slowly accepting, conceding, surrendering, admitting, speaking honestly, and thinking honestly in your own experience. You wouldn't get there. You'd be deeper and deeper and deeper in the depression and the impossibility. So, my suspicion for you may take a minute, but you'll start getting used to these moments and welcome these moments, because you'll start getting so good at saying, oh, okay, this is actually offering me an opportunity. It's like I'm going to class. I'm getting a new textbook. The teacher is giving me new information. Why would I come into the class for the first time and think I know everything? This moment we've never experienced before, you and I or anyone. It's all new. A lot of it seems the same because we've done things that seem consistent, but in one way or another, it's all changing. We're moving constantly, shifting constantly, we're thinking differently constantly. And the great possibility of that is squandered by thinking the only thing possible is impossibility. And I got to fix the impossibility before I can finally enjoy all the possibility. And that is not true. There's nothing to fix in it because there's nothing broken when I stop doing it or start noticing that I'm the one causing it and starts to dissipate. It stops automatically when I stop starting it, because the engagement happens in the present now. It's what I'm thinking about now that causes that, not what's happened in the past, how long I've done it. All those are excuses to consider, once again, it's the only thing I can do, which is that addictive cycle. I don't have anything to do with it. There's nothing I can do about it. So it's the only thing I can do. It's not true. So you're learning, you're growing.
Yes.
That means you have a lot to give. And by giving it in sobriety, there's a paradox, there's a bunch of paradoxes, but one of them is if you give it away, you keep it. Interesting. That means if you give everything away, you get to keep everything. That doesn't add up when we're thinking about the mechanics of a relative experience, that if I gave everything away, I would have nothing left. But we're not talking about relative things. Paradoxes are paradoxes because we think the limited ideas are truth and reality, and we think reality and truth are the physical forms and limitations, rather than notice that the absolute nature is the one that we're ultimately relying on absolutely. So if I can give it all away and keep it, it can, every time I do it and talk about it and express it and get better at talking about it in whatever way comes naturally, I have a greater sense of, a greater confirmation of the overall benefit. And I also have a greater clarity of the sickness and the disease. I can spot it quicker, I can notice it, and not think of it as something contemptible someone is doing, but similar to what I do in the exact same way. So I have a little more compassion than I used to. And I also realize it's not as serious as everybody thinks, that by taking it seriously when it's a joke is to not laugh at the joke. So what do? We cry, create pitiful circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your day today?
Today, right now, maybe I might go for a walk, get some lunch, and then go to work. Yeah.
Walking, by the way,
Mhm.
I read or listened to a book by a neurosurgeon or neuropsychologist or something. He said that walking is ultimately something only humans do naturally. And it's one of the best things we can do to confirm our humanity and also contemplate our reality, real reality, because it's aligned with something that we do as a species, walk upright. Now think about walking upright regarding thinking upright, the stature of being honest, revealing what's happening honestly, talking about it, not as a pitiful conversation, just I'm really feeling disturbed. I feel disturbed right now. I may not be listening as well as I could. I'm feeling disturbed. Admitting it very often releases all of the other busyness built into trying to make it look like it's not happening, which comes from all those decisions of trying to stop it and overcome it rather than just get used to it. And pretty soon you'll get used to it where things that used to bother you won't bother you at all, and things you never even noticed will start really bothering you because you'll be looking at things accurately and seeing that there's enough things in the world to be bothered by, that we do not need to sit home alone to create them. It doesn't make any sense to be alone creating a world that we think is troubled when the troubled world that's out there is lacking the support we could be potentially offering it. And to see something disturbing as disturbed is to have it the way it is and not be in conflict with it. And to be able to appreciate it is to be able to begin to do something about it that would be useful, rather than patch it over and pat somebody on the back and cheerlead them back into feeling better, when in fact the problem has not gotten better at all and the cancer continues to grow.
Yeah.
So I encourage your walking. It's the best meditation. Through history, great minds, philosophers, religious writers, and people, and Bill Wilson, who started AA, talked about contemplative walking. He would take a walk for an hour, just give his brain a little bit of room, contemplate things. So I appreciate you very much. I know that this is not always easy, but I appreciate you stepping into it and talking about it openly. And I expect there's others out there that gain benefit from it. Excuse my excitement when I want to make a point, and I know that I interrupt you at times, and want to let you know that I'm aware of that. It's probably not my best. It's not my best suit, but I'm also bent on. I want to interfere with the story a little bit because I want to focus the conversation on the absolute. Because what I learned is when I finally started realizing the absolute was absolute, regardless of what I thought, I could think it absolutely was and still be thinking it absolutely wasn't while it actually was. It started to kind of relieve me of the fact that I don't have to do anything about it at all for it to be what it is. And if I begin to actually realize that truth has never required my thinking, and it's never been dependent on my thinking, it's always been available and it's part of what we all share, is a huge relief to my thinking. But that huge relief comes with the responsibility of starting to act in accordance with that truth and do what I can to be the best I can for as many as I can in every way, and all the things that are in as many ways as I can, rather than act as though I can't do anything and nobody's going to listen and all that kind of stuff. I can say those things and I can think those things, but they are not true because I say them and think them, or think them and say them. Love you, brother.
Yes. Love you, Jack. Thank you for everything. I'm always peace as well too. Thank you.
We'll do
Always,
this again. This is Harry
of course.
too.
I know this is great. I just feel great, talking to you, getting some knowledge as well too. Just I'm always very thankful. I'm always very thankful that you are here because you never hesitated to pick up the phone when I was in
I'm
one of
not
my
going to
darkest.
interrupt you there.
Yeah, you weren't one. You weren't one of, when I was in one of my darkest moments.
Yeah.
It was just insane. I just it's just right now. It's been 2 years and it's just great. It just feels great to be here, to be in the moment, to be present.
And you've done work. You've been honest.
Yes.
You've looked at things. That is something that is critical. Nobody can do it for you. The one thing we have is the freedom to come to those conclusions that we make. And to
Mhm.
begin to notice that is to begin to notice that whatever is happening is how we want it to happen. Even if we're sick, we want things that are sick. But to notice that is to begin to realize we have no obligation to continue it at all, whatever. We never had it, never will.
Mhm.
We're free to do what we want. We're so free to do what we want. We're free to think we can't do anything but the sickest thing, and there's nothing else we can do.
Mhm.
So make some notes too, Eric, when you walk. Suggestion: make some notes of the thoughts that come to you, and watch as time passes how those, it's simple notes, not too elaborate stuff you can refer to very quickly. Watch how those thoughts develop and grow and begin to get more expansive and more inclusive. In the
Mhm.
beginning, it's kind of like, this is all I can do. And then pretty soon they start melting and you realize, oh, I can do whatever I want to do. And I've been doing whatever I want to do. It's just crazy. I've been doing the sickest thing I could do rather than
Mhm.
something that's healthy and useful and beneficial to everyone. And to a degree, even the failure is beneficial because it seems to be required. There's an old adage, pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth. It seems as though until we're really in pain, we don't do anything about it because we think we still got it. We think we're going to control it. We think we're going to manage it. We think we're going to get better. But pain tells us something is wrong. That's its purpose. So even within the pain, there's a perfect guidance system helping us come to terms with our participation in it. So watching other people in pain is seeing them crying for help while they often can't admit it. They can be angry, they can be insufferable to deal with, and all of those things. But ultimately, it's something going on in them that they're very, very, very deep in a struggle with and could potentially kill them. And they're going to die anyway, but dying sooner or taking your own life is obviously something we are causing by the thinking we're doing, the anxiety that we're subjecting our experience, our physical experience to. It's not necessary. Certainly a possibility. It's at an all-time high. It's pretty good proof that we're capable of that. So
I know. I was actually afraid of that thinking,
yeah.
because I just didn't want to do that. Just by thinking that, it would just freak me out. It would just scary. But at that time, it just I was so dark that I knew it was wrong thinking. I
Yeah.
knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong, but I just my mind was just there. It's still hard for me to explain that experience.
Well, think of that twist, though, Harry. You're admitting you knew it was wrong, and but you kept doing something that was wrong to fix it. Right.
Yeah,
That's the addictive urge.
once I realized that I was that was wrong thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I became who I am right now. I became that was one of the processes that I started doing. That kind of like got me to where I am right.
Yeah.
That that I had to admit that I was wrong. My ego was just no, I'm always right. You keep fighting. Don't give up. Don't surrender. That was me.
Well, and
But that
keep in mind too that whole concept of ego is you choosing to make believe that thought is right, and then you think you have an ego that's acting against you as though it's separate from you and has a life of its own. It doesn't. It's all wholly imagined.
yes, but
We
I'm
almost
also
got there earlier, so
but that was
I'm
my yeah, that was my thinking that I was always right.
yeah.
Even if you even if even if I knew I was wrong, I would make
Oh,
myself
you knew
think.
it.
Yeah,
You knew it. You didn't want to listen to it.
I know, but that was just a lot of there was a lot of fighting in my head. I would feel tense, anxious, and once I realized that like it's just like I said before, everything vanishes. Everything
Yeah.
vanishes, and then it just feels and it feels peaceful. I feel peace. It feels great, you know. I feel lighter. It's like it's just a great feeling. It is a great feeling. Peace.
See you around campus.
See you.
Thanks, Harry, very much.
Thank you, Jack. Have a great day. Thank you.
You got to put it.
Love
You
you.
too. Love you too,
Thank
man.
you.
Bye.